Okay. Jason Scanlon, welcome. Just before we start, if you could just introduce yourself, your career, the kind of role you're running now, and then we'll get into the topic for discussion today.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon to you too, Sam. Thanks for having me on board. So as I said, my name is Jason Scanlon. I've worked in the IT sector primarily within Ireland for over 20 odd years, close to 25. Largely in the managed IT services space, and particularly with a MSP provider in Limerick for a large chunk of my time. And then I moved to an in-house IT manager's role with a company in Shannon that looked primarily indeed with, I suppose, project delivery for the medtech sector, an automation company essentially. And then after that, I recently joined Numata. I suppose I've been there 2 or 3 years now. I'm their CISO and resident, and really my role there is to help and advise our customers, I suppose, along the path of better cybersecurity posture. And I come at it from a guy who is, I suppose, anyone that's worked at the MSP will know that, one day you're inside, you're installing a firewall. 2 days later, you could be migrating Office 365 mailboxes. So it really comes at it from that perspective. It's a really kind of a hands-on kind of technical role when you're working with MSPs. So I come from cyber from that perspective as a person who's been through that. And I've done this, I suppose, as I said, for the last 25 years nearly at this stage. And that covers SMEs, micros, and into consultancy stints with large-scale multinationals. So that's my background really, Sam. That's where I come at all things cyber.
Yeah, great. From. So not an ivory tower situation then.
No, very much not.
Okay. Yeah, well, I suppose the reason I just thought it'd be useful for us to have a quick chat, and hopefully people will find it useful, is I know you and I kind of got to know each other over LinkedIn, and we just found out that both of us grew up in Limerick. I came out of there after college or whatever, but I actually didn't realize that because I know Numata is a South African company.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're South African headquartered MSP space. We're only in Ireland in the last 2 or 3 years, but we equally have a presence in the UK as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. So what I found interesting and what was useful for this conversation was I had come across this Northwave cybersecurity report where they had analysed not actually the financial cost of a cyber attack or whatever, but actually was more the impact on staff or the impact on those that were involved in the response and recovery of the attack. And their key points were around the mental impact, the psychological impact on individuals. Things like, I think at the time, just looking at my notes here, they'd said, look, there's some obvious things. There's a lack of sleep. There's binge eating and drinking. A month later, people can still feel very guilty because they didn't see the attack coming. And then even a year later, that 1 in 7 people that were involved in the instant recovery still showed signs of some kind of trauma. So I thought that was quite powerful. And then I saw that you had published something recently on the Numata side, which talked about the same report, but you had a very strong kind of analogy in the physical world, which really kind of made it jump off the page for me. So maybe if you want to just talk through how you describe it.
Yeah, sure. So, taking a look at that report again, it's quite detailed, right? So we took an analogy of a robbery situation. In this instance, we took an equipment business for argument's sake, but it could be any business or it could be your home. And we all know what happens in a robbery. It's that shock and awe, right? That terrorizing feeling that you get when you come through the door and see what's happened either to your business premises or to your house. So, but in this particular instance, we used the business premises. We took the effects, I suppose, the mental impact upon 3 members of staff, and the whole, I suppose, idea that is to kind of hit home the message that when a cyber attack happens, there's a human side to all of this. And with the human side, there's a mental side to that as well. It's the effects on the psychological being, I suppose, of somebody. And, we play out that analogy about how the equipment from the business gets stolen, how it gets replaced, how you bolster up your security measures in terms of physical security, CCTV, fencing, whatever the case may be. And then we kind of flip it on its head a small bit, but hang on, what about the 3 or 4 members of staff that happened to be on duty at that day that were tied up during it? I was trying to make that, I suppose, create that mental image in one's head of what it's like to go through a cyber attack. In this instance, then, if you're working in an IT or if you're the person that maybe clicked on the link, it's that sinking feeling. And how long does that stay with you? And that's what I thought really, it's something we never discuss within the IT sector or within the
Mhm.
cybersecurity community. We often talk about the defenses, what can we do in terms of technology, the processes. Something we never really address is the mental
Yeah,
impact of it.
yeah. I mean, it's like kind of even when you talk about incident response, or when you're going through incident response, and hopefully not too many people have gone through it. But you write down on paper, well, if we believe there's been an incident, we triage it, we do this, we do the other. And we have, hopefully you have the experts involved to kind of clean it up. But as you say, nobody's written down in the incident response document to say, oh, by the way, if there's any suspicion that it's this person that clicked the link, they're going to need, to be kind of comforted to say, look, it could have happened to anyone. It was a particularly sophisticated phishing email or whatever. It got you at a bad time. All of us are kind of susceptible to the right message at the right time. But that's not really something that anyone thinks about in advance, you
No.
know.
And again, when we think of that moment of when a cyber attack happens, it's, I spoke last week at an event and I talked about calm heads, right?
Mm,
It's bringing it back down. And because lots of people are running around or running and racing, it does speak to good incident response planning. Of course it does. And as you said, and rightly so, where in the incident response plan does it say you have to go to John or Mary and put the arm around them? And that's really what we're doing. We're talking about checking in with staff, right? We're
mm-hmm.
talking about, going to them. Is there anything we can help them with if they are a part of the incident response team? And how does that play out then outside of work then, Sam? I suppose you quite rightly mentioned, I suppose, the binge eating, the not so good food, right?
Mm-hmm.
The late hours, the stress of trying to get the business back up and running. And then you as a father or you as a brother or whatever, what does that look like on your own family life there afterwards? There's no doubt that you're probably giving up your hobby time, your family time, just to
True.
get the business back up and running. And I don't think that anyone has really truly assessed that and stood back. And that's really what I suppose the report hit home to me as someone who's been through that experience. I suppose I related to it because I've been that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it really struck a chord with me that we never really check in, and that can lead to other things like disgruntled employees. And we do know that, disgruntled employees, whether we like it or not, can become a source of insider threats. And that's never a good place to be when that
No,
happens.
no. Like I think back on some of the incidents that I've been involved in as an employee, or since I've kind of gone out advising. I do remember like the Conficker, I think it was Conficker back in 2008,
Mhm.
coming into our company, when I think we'd only just about connected all the computers to the internet, and going around, it was all hands on deck. We were all running around the
100%.
building trying to, remove this worm or this malware or whatever it was. Doing it, it was great. Like I think we were all on site 24 hours or 36 hours or something like that. It was manic, but it was there was an energy to it.
Yes.
Then we all went home, or we were all told, right, that's kind of cleaned it up. We can all go home. We all went home. Some of us via the local pub, managed to have about one pint before you fell asleep, and then got a phone call to say, oh well, actually, what we've done, that didn't work. So everyone has to come back in again. So I mean, it was fine for a lot of us because we didn't have commitments, we didn't have families at the time. Um, you could manage to find a way at the drop of a hat to spend 36 hours on site helping your employer recover. But going back on site again, trying to maintain motivation levels, and then obviously then the rumors about how did it come in, who was it that clicked a link or whatever it was, and then the stress on that individual. And it doesn't really matter, for people to say, oh well, it's not your fault or whatever. The individual still believes it is their fault. And
100%. Yeah.
and especially, with email compromise where it is specifically somebody's email account. It's all fine for us to say, well, it's not about the individual. Any of us could have been a victim. Let's anonymize the report so nobody knows who it was. If it's somebody's email account, you can't anonymize every single one of the emails that are being investigated. So it very quickly gets out who the individual was, or which email account it was. So it is very hard, if there's no, forethought around how do we support the victim, even though none of us say that they are responsible, but
Yes.
they still will feel being the victim, they still feel the guilt of that.
100%. And that's, again, it kind of speaks to putting the arm around them and ensuring them having that safe space for that employee. I remember being in a couple of incidents, and I remember one person openly breaking down in front of me, and I just said, right, come on, Let's just go out here, grab a cup of coffee, take the 5 or 10 minutes away from the environment, just to, put perspective on things to a certain degree.
And was that breakdown because they felt they were responsible, or was it just because they couldn't deal with the stress of the response?
It's actually the stress of the response. It was really the recovery efforts, right? And trying to bring all the people together, because it's a difficult time, and it's a difficult time anyway. And then you have the added pressure of the business wanting to be back up and running, or business as usual.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult place to be. And as you rightly said, who wants to be that person that clicked on the link, that did something they shouldn't have done? And we know human error is a large portion of, I suppose, incidents that happen. But it's not about a blame game, is it, as you said? But no matter how many times we say that, as you said, the person that's done it was always going to feel like that. So, and that's what I find about this report. It discusses an area that we don't talk about very much. So it's very important that, we look after our employees, we go to them, we check in with them. It's simple things, I always say.
If you think about, again, all hands on deck. So, I mean, some of this can be because of a lack of appropriate incident response planning, but it's a massive attack. You're basically asking anyone that has an ability to log into a computer, can you help us out here? Some people can go, yeah, I've got nothing going on. Other people go, no, I've got like 2 kids at home. I'm supposed to be there. There's soccer training. There's this, that, and the other. Like, people have commitments. And sometimes even that can cause people to feel guilty, because they're like, oh, well, I can't, guilty about either not sticking to their family commitments, or guilty about not being able to kind of step up when their employer needs it. Like, everyone can contribute in different ways at different times. It's just like a guilt game. Everyone gets a bit of guilt somewhere or other.
Yeah, 100%, and very good points there, Sam. Equally too, the stage you are at life, right, is a huge factor in this. And as you said, when you're a young guy, no toys, or a young girl with no toys, you can run around and you can spend those hours doing X, Y, or Z. But then when you had a family life, and then it becomes different, as you said, and picking up the kids from whatever activities they're doing, or going out for a meal or something, whatever the case is. And as you said, you can feel guilt then, right? And if you don't do what your employer is asking you, you might feel guilt. And then when you do it, you probably feel guilt that you've let somebody else down on the family side, right? So it's in many ways, I don't use the term, but I suppose I will use it. It's kind of a lose-lose, right? So that's
I mean, there's elements of, I mean, obviously in an ideal world, we would all sit down and go, right, how do we plan this out? Recognizing that this could happen at a good time of the month, or the year, or the quarter, or it can happen at a bad time. So a good time when nobody's on leave, nobody has any family commitments. It happens hopefully at a Friday after close of business. Nobody seems to be doing anything for the weekend, so everyone can kind of dig in. But the reality is, regardless of what you or I might say, a lot of organizations go into an attack without any kind of a plan. So I suppose if we accept that reality, or recognize the reality, while it may not be acceptable, what are the kinds of things that you think, if anyone watching this or listening to this finds themselves in a situation where they're trying to deal with an attack tomorrow and they don't have a plan, what are the things that, while they're dealing with that fire and they're dealing with the panic, what are the things that you would suggest they should be mindful of as they're going through that process with other people?
Yeah, I would say be mindful of the fact that I think every one of us in life has challenges, right? Or things going on, and how we address and how we communicate people, I always find it dictates the tone of the conversation going forward. So if I come at you in the middle of a crisis and say, Sam, did you do this? Straight away, how could you not get your back up? How can you not feel that you want to? So I think communication and how we communicate, being mindful of what others have in their life in terms of family commitments, any other issues that they may have. I think, one thing that COVID has taught us is that, our adaptability has become greater. We're managing to survive things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, we should forget about people and whatever they have going on. And we all have stuff going on, right? So those are the key two things, I suppose. Having I suppose, an understanding and a supporting structure around your employees during that time, and that could be very simple. It could just be, I suppose, a quiet space somewhere. It could be, I don't know, bringing in, if you have counselling services, things, anything at all that I think that can make the employees feel safer.
Yeah.
And I suppose more secure, and that, as part of this too, that a lot of times when a cyber attack happens, as we know, there tends to be a blame game, right? And whether directly or indirectly, it tends to happen. But after all of the dust is settled, I'm telling you, there'll be plenty of the blame pie to go around for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think, we need to be mindful of that and kind of step away from that and say, okay, well, if this happened, why did it happen? And use a different approach to it, using more, I suppose, I don't know the word I'm looking for, a human approach, maybe understanding approach. So those are the key things for me.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it does show kind of, the value of having someone who has gone through it before, and that could be anyone. I mean, if you have a large enough company, there's going to be somebody in there who has gone through this before, and the value of them, even though they have no role to play, just to be able to get them involved and say, look, you've gone through this before. Have you got any pointers for us? Can you make sure that we don't do the things that you did badly? The other piece, I suppose, again, assuming they don't have a plan, a lot of the plans would have an element whereby, you do pull in a communication expert, or you do have your communication plans straightened out, including those for staff. But you also may call in your, the HR people, if you have HR skills in-house, or people, the hug team, or whatever it is, but at least someone that is mindful of, while people are focused on what to do, that there's somebody in the room that's mindful of how we go about doing that and how we communicate that. Because, you and I know, when you're in the middle of an incident, there is panic, there is stress. And some people lash out when there is stress. And if it's a senior person that behaves that way, that can really cause problems down the line for people who are under stress already. So it can be very good to have someone in the room or on the line that is, taking the edge off how things are being communicated, how things are being discussed and managed. Easy to do when you're kind of writing a plan and you're lining people up, and you're finding people that you can call in a panic. But if you don't have that plan and you're in the middle of an incident, something to be mindful of: is there somebody within the company or somebody that that you could call in and say, look, can you just sit in on these things, listen to what we're talking about, make sure that we're communicating this, we're not causing undue stress on people. It's a tough one, but it might be helpful.
No, 100%, Sam. And I think everybody in the business, when it comes to a cyber attack, has a part to play. Everybody will have something to offer. I think expertise in any of these areas around, whether it be HR or legal, they all have something to offer. And, at a time of crisis, I always believe, why would you refuse help? It doesn't matter where it comes. Everyone has something to offer. Everybody has something to bring to the equation. And as you said, somebody within your company must have been through or have gone through some kind of security incident. And that's why I talk about the support structures. As you said, even if it's someone in a room that just says, I think maybe you should communicate this way, or it's those small things. Like I keep saying it. And as you said, it's a pressurized environment. The last thing you want to do is get somebody's back up. So any kind of support structures, any kind of, I suppose, I don't want to say de-stress of the situation, but a certain element of de-stressing it, yes, and bringing it back. And the other key component I keep saying is, don't be embarrassed. Like, the amount of companies, I suppose, that probably feel like they don't want to report something because of the shame or the embarrassment, gone. The attacks we're dealing with now are very sophisticated. People like you or me can even get caught out, and there's no shame in that, and there is support services there, the Garda Síochána, etc. Utilize the support that's there. Don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed by it. And equally, as I said before, if you do need to bring in some kind of counseling services or some kind of support services for your employees during that time, why not?
Yeah. The other piece, as with all these things, is if you have any kind of suspicion around something, even if you're not quite sure, is this an attack? Is this an incident? Is this just a false alarm? I think the sooner you kind of bring people into a room, the sooner you can figure out, is this really something? Is this really an attack? But also, the sooner you get into a room, the sooner you can do all that. As we learned in college, the forming and the norming and the performing. So,
Yes,
by getting that group together as early possible, you can nearly make the mistakes before you're in the stress of realizing this really is an attack.
100%.
And
Yeah.
also job titles. I mean, I've seen it where somebody might have a job title which is very technical. They might be, in a very technical role. And it might turn out that their soft skills and their ability to sit in the room and be that sounding board to say, oh, hold on a second, don't communicate it that way, approach it this way, or don't go to that person, they're already under pressure, go to this person. It's amazing how someone that you think, oh, black and white, very, very kind of left brainy person turns out to be the person that can be the person that puts a bit of humanity into how things are being dealt with. So don't let job titles limit your the scope of the people you might call in.
Correct, 100%. And as I said, if for arguments we talk about HR people, they could very well have a particular skill and coaching or whatever, as you said, and it has a huge part to play. And don't ever underestimate it, And I think the more collaborative we are, the better, right?
Yeah, all hands on deck.
Correct.
Well, that's great, Jason. Thanks a lot. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, where's the best place to get in touch?
Sure, yeah. So on the Numata website, numata.ie, my own email address is jason.scanlon@numata.co. I'm available on LinkedIn, as you know, Sam. So
yeah. And in Limerick, as we figured out.
In Limerick, yes. We're here in Bedford Row in Limerick. So
okay.
yeah. So by all means, have a look at.
Okay, great. Well, look, thanks a lot, Jason, and talk to you soon.